Hello, welcome back to the channel. I've got a fun one for you today. I've got the Final Fantasy set review. It's a pretty interesting set, I think, because it's sort of this universes beyond, but not universes beyond. I think that we all went into it with an expectation that the power level on the set was going to be really high. Obviously, Lord of the Rings is a set that, well, had really high peaks, maybe not quite as large a depth of cards, but there were really, really obviously format warping cards in the set like that. And this one is not at that power level, and I think that's largely to do with the fact that the set had to go through standard, but there are still a lot of pretty interesting cards to talk about, so I have done my usual slideshow to talk about them. For me, oh, I spelled categories wrong. It's all right. We're doing it wrong. We're doing it live and wrong. So my categories, I have format staples, possible playables, maybe in one deck, and the I will probably die to this card category. For this set, these categories I think blend together pretty closely. Like, there are a few cards that I think we can feel pretty confident about showing up in the format and being staples in the types of decks that want them. But then after that, I think the answer to a lot of the cards is like maybe that you can play them. My guess is that a lot of them we will try and we'll discover they're basically the same power level or slightly worse than the things we already have. And one other little piece of context that I think I should give is that a lot of the cards from this set are legendary creatures, and to not belabor the point every single time it comes up, Caracas is a real issue with a lot of these cards, and so something you want to be looking at with legendary creatures is, do they have an ability that either they have haste or maybe they have protection of some sort, or do they do something on ETB? Because if they don't, it's going to be harder to justify playing anything that costs more than like 2 or 3 mana if it can potentially get Caracas. I'm sure we've all played the games where you tap out for your 4-drop legend that does nothing and it gets Caracas and you feel like you just can never win. So without further ado, I will attempt to deflect this orange cat who is attempting to interrupt the presentation. Uh, so we'll get into the first set of format staples. I think I'm higher on this card than most people are, but Astrologian's Planisphere, I'm pretty excited about. This is 1 and a blue for an artifact equipment, and it has the keyword job select, which is essentially living weapon, except it makes a 1/1 instead of a 0/0. So when this enters, you get to make a 1/1 hero and then attach the equipment to it. So it is a creature, essentially. Any of these job select equipment, they are secretly creatures, which is nice. And this one, the ability is equipped creature is a wizard in addition to its other types, and has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell and whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, put a 1/1 counter on this creature, and it equips for 2. And I think the equip for 2 is the thing that makes this one particularly exciting to me. 1/1 for 2 that grows every time you cast a non-creature spell is okay. The draw a 3rd card is going to come up like very occasionally, but I don't envision that being a major thing. But it's okay. Like, I think that's a card that you're pretty happy to play, and it's on a reasonable rate. But the fact that you can also move this onto like a flyer, you can move this onto a creature with prowess, I think that's the reason this card's going to be quite good. And I think you're going to see it in the kind of blue spells matter deck. I have a hard time imagining that this one's not good enough to get in there. I could be wrong. I think I'm higher on this card than a lot of other people are potentially, but I really like this one. I'm going to be playing it a lot, trying to find the best ways to use it. It's also one thing that's interesting. A lot of these kind of creature equipments, it's definitely making cards like Stoneforge Mystic more interesting and other equipment tutors. And I think broadly, that's a pretty intriguing place to be. But yeah, I just think this keyword of basically like a counter for every non-creature spell is really powerful as a keyword. I think there's a lot of situations that I can envision where this is going to be quite good. It turns any potential random creature into a like massive threat potentially, and I just like the versatility of it being a creature at first. If the creature dies, you keep the equipment around, and the equip cost is not too unwieldy. Some of the equipments from this set, you know, the equip cost is like 3 or 4, and I think at that point it's kind of unrealistic to end up re-equipping all that often. But for 2, I think there's a lot of decks that are going to find themselves with 2 mana that they're willing to spend to turn their creature into a pretty scary threat. Next, we have Sephiroth, Fabled Soldier. Obviously, a titular character. Well, not titular, but a main character. And at least they made one of the main characters powerful. So Sephiroth is a 3/3 for 2 and a black that says when Sephiroth enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card. And then whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then if this is the 4th time this ability has resolved this turn, you transform Sephiroth. And on the flip side, it's Sephiroth, One-Winged Angel, which is a flying 5/5 with the ability, as this creature transforms, you get an emblem that says whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So like, and then it says whenever Sephiroth attacks, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. If you do, draw that many cards. So this is like like an absurd Aristocrats card. It's the best Aristocrats card they've printed since like maybe the Meat Hook Massacre or something like that. The fact that it is an emblem that exists outside the game, I think that means that you might even be interested in playing this outside of an Aristocrats sub-theme even. The fact that you can kind of like self-enable the draw card ability is pretty nice too. I could see you wanting to potentially play this in black-red. And it's worth noting that the flip happens on any creature dying. So if there's just a big combat where 2 of your creatures trade with 2 of their creatures, you flip Sephiroth. So yes, 4 times triggering sounds like a lot, but it is important to note that it is not a creature you control. And I think that this card has the potential to generate some really awkward, really awkward board states for your opponent where blocking gets awkward. They don't want to block. They don't want to make trades. It turns your removal spells on. So yeah, I really like this one. I would expect to see this one around a lot. The fact that it creates an emblem that is a drain, like basically a Blood Artist emblem, is absurd. Like things that exist outside the board of play that you can't actually interact with are gross, for lack of a better word. I think that this card's going to be very good. Okay, so Tifa Lockhart is a 1 and a green 1/2 trample, and it has landfall. When a land enters, you double Tifa's power. So obviously people have talked about the synergies with what's the one that makes you a 6/4. There's the one green and it sets your base power to be 6/4. I actually can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, which is embarrassing as an in effect player. But you know, like people have talked about if you do that and then play a fetch land, she becomes a 24 power attacker right away. The 2 toughness is sketchy. It means that you're gonna have to pick your spots for when she attacks. You don't want to just chuck her into a situation where she's maybe pushing like 3 or 4 damage and then dying. I don't think a lot of the time, but it's worth noting like she plays really well with pump spells. And I think one of the varieties of red deck that has been close for a long time is Red Green Blitz, like the kind of like pump spell deck. I know Jer is really high on that deck. A friend of ours, Greg, is very high on that deck, and I think that it's very powerful. And this is a card that is like amazing in that kind of deck. If you're finding ways to pump Tifa's power before you're playing lands, I think it's very good. And if you have ways to help keep her alive with pump spells, I think it's also very good. So she's just going to be one of these creatures that if you have her on turn 2, it's like threat level 1,000,000, like it's going to need to die or else it's going to threaten to end the game. And obviously it is going to die a lot of the time. Like I'm not saying that this card is like a 10 out of 10 unbeatable one, but I think that it is high enough threat that it is a pretty interesting one, and one that I would expect to see a lot in those style of decks. Lightning Army of 1 is a 1 red-white legendary creature human soldier. Human is a potentially relevant type line, by the way. Same thing on Tifa. She has the human type line. Can matter. I don't know if we have a human deck yet, but we're definitely getting there if we don't have one yet. Lightning has First Strike, Trample, and Lifelink. It's a 3/2, and it has the ability Stagger, which is when lightning deals combat damage to a player until your next turn, so on their turn as well. If a source would deal damage to that player or a permanent that player controls, it deals double that damage instead. So this is a really splashy effect. And I could be wrong, I will say, and that maybe this card is unplayable because of the stat line or because of the Caracas of it all, but I don't think it is. I think this card is quite good. If Stagger triggers when you have untapped mana, your burn spells all of a sudden, like you can envision a situation where you play this on turn 3, on turn 4, you maybe remove a blocker or something like that, it does get to connect, and then all of a sudden, like the chain lightning bolt in your hand just end the game, and they take 12. Or if you've curved 1 drop, 2 drop into lightning, and then on turn 4 you can remove one of their blockers, you get the first strike damage, and then your 1 and 2 drops are dealing double damage, and you can just imagine this card ending games very, very quickly. And it's also worth noting one thing I want to try to keep doing in my own head is this card is castable with Arena of Glory as well, which is a card that I think is something to keep in mind when you're evaluating these kind of red creatures that don't necessarily inherently have haste. So if you can imagine like Arena of Glorying Lightning, like that's also, I think, a pretty scary spot to be in. She also is going to hold equipment really well, which obviously is intentional given that the equipment is such a major factor in this set. Yeah, I really like this card. I think that the kind of like Boros Taxes deck might be interested in something like this. One thing about this is the red-white decks, the way that they're going to play into the combo decks is that they usually go like for a couple of disruptive pieces, and then they're trying to really race to end the game. And lightning is a way to really accelerate your clock. Like if your opponent isn't blocking and isn't really interacting with your board, I mean, if lightning hits the table, theoretically next turn they're dying a lot of the time. I think it's reasonable to think. So yeah, I like lightning a lot. I could see her in like Boros Taxes. I think like a Naya Monster Shell might really like a lightning, something like that, where you could potentially curve her into some like hasty green and red threats, something like that. I think there's a lot of spots to go. Yeah, I think she's very cool. There's also maybe like a sweet, like maybe she fits in like a pingers deck. I don't know. If we wanted to go really crazy, we could play some pingers, because it does just say any source. So you could even do stuff with like Thermo Alchemist and stuff, which is kind of interesting as well. But I don't think that's the way to play this. I think you just want to play it as a regular creature. But I like lightning a lot. Vivi Ornitier. I'm not good at pronouncing this name. I tried like 3 or 4 times before I recorded. Is probably, I think, the most exciting card for a lot of people from this set, especially if you're a blue mage. So Vivi is a 1 blue-red legendary creature wizard. Wizard is some nice creature typing. It is a 0/3, and it has an ability that it costs 0 to activate that says add X mana in any combination of blue or red, where X is Vivi's power. Activate only during your turn and only once each turn. And then it says, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 counter on Vivi and deal 1 damage to each opponent. So obviously this is a pretty exciting combination of text boxes. 0/3 that grows every time you cast a non-creature spell and deals damage is already kind of interesting. I think that we would probably not be talking about that card as like a potential format staple, but it would be a card that we would be thinking about. But the adding the mana is the real juice here, I think, and the card and the part of this card that makes it particularly exciting. I'm having a hard time envisioning this being a combo card. I know that, you know, you can do some things with repeal and maybe try and find some ways to get to activate the ability like more than once in a turn, because it notably does not require tapping. It doesn't get affected by summoning sickness. So like theoretically, if you were to flicker Vivi, you do get to use the ability again, but you need to rebuild Vivi's power in order to enable that. So I'm not sure I see it there. But the big thing here is like this just allows you to basically free roll 1 mana spells if you're in a blue-red deck. Like if you go cantrip, lightning bolt or something, and you spent your 3 mana to do that, well, Vivi just lets you get all that mana back right away to cast another spell. Now it's worth noting you can't like cast sorcery speed spells and then use Vivi's ability to hold up counter spells on your opponent's turn, so that's a tension that you're going to have to think about. But this is a card that I think is going to hit the table and potentially take over games. If it gets to sit around for a turn or two, it's going to just generate all of the mana that you would be using on sorcery speed things. And it's worth noting that the blue and red mana is not gated to instants and sorceries or like non-creature spells, which I kind of thought you might see with a card like this. It's just usable for anything. So you can like play Vivi, cast a couple non-creature spells, and then like cast a dragon or something with the red mana. It's all available. So yeah, I like this card a lot, pretty high on it. I know that people have talked about doing things like with like curiosity and stuff, and I think that's probably more of a commander angle, to be honest, because you just can't put those cards in your Canadian Highlander deck reliably. Although I will shout out there, a friend of the channel, Pat, did play like blue red pingers like 10 years ago. And boy, that deck is just getting more and more cards. And this is another one that you could add to the list for sure, where you stick a curiosity on this, and all of a sudden, every time you cast a spell, it reads like draw a card, put a counter on this thing, maybe make a mana. But yeah, very exciting card. I think it's going to be good in like the any of the is it shells. Like basically, if you're playing blue and red cards, I imagine this one's going to get in all the time. I think Jeskai likes this card actually, which is interesting. It's powerful there, I think, because it allows you to kind of use it as a mana battery to deploy threats while holding up your other spells. And it's another card that, you just get to play it and they have to kill it. And I think if you're Jeskai, you're very happy to have those kinds of cards. And one other thing, this is a less impactful, I think, but it does pitch to two of the better colors to pitch to. Obviously, the blue pitch portion is very good, and then it pitches to Fury as well, which Jeskai cares about a lot. So yeah, VV, very exciting, and I think it's the last of the cards that I have in the format staple, and I'm now into my list of possible playables. And I will say, from here on out, I think it gets a little murky. A lot of these cards I think are reasonably interesting, and you might see them in a couple of decks, but I just wasn't willing to put the stamp of I think these are going to be seen in most deck lists or become stock in certain deck lists, like I was with the other ones. So the first one is Summon Bahamut. This is a 9-mana saga, a dragon enchantment creature. It's a lot of typing. Chapter 1 and 2 is destroy up to one target non-land permanent. Chapter 3 is draw 2 cards. And then Chapter 4 is Mega Flare. This creature deals damage equal to the mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. I kind of like this as a reanimator threat. It is cool that it just is reanimatable and then immediately just destroys something. We don't have a ton of effects in Reanimator like this that are particularly playable anymore. Ashen Rider and the much older Angel of Despair are the other ones that you used to reach for, and you just don't see those in decks anymore. And a big part of that is that Ashen Rider, it's hilarious to be saying this, but Ashen Rider is only a 5/5 flyer, which frankly, like, it is blockable on a lot of boards these days, and it only generates a 2-for-1, which is not enough as your reanimation threat. I really like that Bahamut is this kind of like surgical, destroy a really important thing if you need to. And then it's a 9/9, which is obviously like a lot more impactful as a potential lethal attacker. It then can clear the way for its own attack on the next turn. It draws 2 cards subsequently, so it's refueling you. And then the Mega Flare, I think, is unlikely to deal a lot of damage, but it's nice that when it dies, you're kind of re-enabling, reanimating it again if you want to. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this one's going to be unbelievable or anything, but I could see myself reaching for it in some of the cheat shells for sure. It's definitely a card that seems interesting, especially if you're going to be able to reanimate it. It's also kind of intriguing with like show and tell, because you can just kill whatever they show and tell into play. You destroy whatever they show and tell, and as long as it's on a land, I guess, which is kind of interesting as well. So yeah, I like Bahamut. I could see it being a card we reach for in the cheat shells. I'm not certain it's right, but we have been looking for kind of like the 4th creature to put into play, and it does seem pretty good to me. Cloud, Midgar Mercenary, is a legendary creature, human soldier mercenary. Cast for white. It's a 2/1, and it says when Cloud enters, search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. And then as long as Cloud is equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So Cloud is sort of like Stoneforge Mystic minus. I think it's maybe slightly worse than Stoneforge Mystic, because obviously it can't put the equipment into play. But I think that this is a pretty powerful effect, and there are some equipments that we really like finding. Notably, like, this is another way to find Shuko, which is pretty reasonable. And that's definitely something that the Nadu decks would be interested in. I think that we've been just getting more and more equipments, and that we might be at the point now where there's enough density of solid equipments and solid cards that care about equipment that maybe you could actually build a kind of like Naya Equipment Matters deck as well. Yeah, I have some other cards in the slideshow that talk about that. But yeah, I just think that this card is just fine. I think that you're pretty happy to play it. Obviously, like Magical Christmas Land is like you get to put like a sword on this card, and it triggers twice when Cloud connects or something like that, which would obviously be very good. But even just as the baseline of it's a 2/1 that goes and replaces itself, gets an equipment card that you might need, particularly if you need a combo one, like that seems quite good. This is just a solid enough effect on a body that I think that this is a card that we will feasibly be reaching for a decent amount of the time. Delivery Moogle is 3 and a white for a creature Moogle. It's a flying 3/2, and it says when this creature enters, search your library and/or graveyard for an artifact card with mana value 2 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle. This to me is a Time Vault card. I'm not certain that it gets in, but I wanted to talk about it. I think in particular, it's nice that it finds things from the graveyard. So this is a creature that can regrowth a Time Vault or Voltaic Key or whatever if it happens to have been destroyed or discarded or something like that. And there's just not that many of those kinds of effects. I think this card is powerful because it's flexible as well. It is just a tutor if you need it to be a tutor, while also being recursion if you need it to be recursion. So for me, I think this hits enough breakpoints where I'm going to be including it, especially in those like blue, white, green Time Vault shells. I don't think that you would necessarily play it in Esper. I've also been playing like blue-white Time Vault, just straight up blue-white Time Vault, and I think this card gets into there as well. It's also worth noting that like 3/2 flying is like actually a relevant stat line. The thing with like Trinket Mage or what's the 2-mana one called? It's not Trophy Mage, not Transit Mage. Anyway, the 2-mana one. Or the 3-mana one that finds Time Vault. It's only a 2/2 for 3, which is like a pretty embarrassing stat line, all things considered. So Delivery Moogle having flying means that it's going to potentially like trade for something more impactful. You can use it to hold back like a Dragon's Rage Channeler, something of that ilk, which I also think is pretty nice. So I like Delivery Moogle. I mean, it's a Time Vault card, but I think it's a Time Vault card we will reach for. Okay, the image quality on some of these is not great, and I apologize. Oh, and my camera is covering this up. Holy. All right, hold on. This is Memories Returning. That's what this card is called. We're doing it live. I'm getting a little smaller. All right, I'm a little smaller, but you can see the cards. This is all good. So a couple of blue cards here that I just flagged as cards that I think we might include in certain decks. Louis Souk's Sacrifice. Oh God, I said that one so wrong. And people who really like the games, I'm sure are going to be mad at me, and I apologize. I'm not going to try again. I'm not. It's a 1 blue instant, and it says as an additional cost to cast the spell, sack a legendary creature or pay 2. And the effect is counter target, activated ability, triggered ability, or non-creature spell. I think this card's actually kind of interesting. If you get to pay for it by sacking a legendary creature that you genuinely don't need, this is going to feel unreal because it's like 1 mana negate, or notably, I think the fact that it is also 1 mana stifle, well, stifle always costs 1 mana, but the flexibility there is kind of interesting. I like this as a potential card, especially against the combo decks. Obviously, you're not thrilled with needing to sacrifice your pressure to stop yourself from dying, but this is a way that kind of allows you to maybe on 3 mana play a 2-drop legendary creature that's going to represent some pressure while still having this kind of stopgate of, okay, but I know I'm not going to die, and then if I get to untap, I can just pay the 3 mana for this card to have it be my interaction. So yeah, I won't belabor the point. I don't think this card is unbelievable, but I'm going to try it and see how it feels. I think that if you're paying 3 mana for this effect, you're not thrilled. Obviously, like, there are better ways to be countering spells, and the fact that this is only negate is sketchy, but only costing 2 and a blue instead of having a double blue pip cost is also something that I think might be relevant. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to reach for this card occasionally, and if it's powerful, great. I will have mentioned it in my set review, and if it's not powerful, then that's fine as well. Matoya Archon Elder is a 2 and a blue legendary creature, human warlock, more humans. It's a 1/4, and it has some pretty exciting text, which is whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card. And notably, this happens after the scry or the surveil. Trent and I have a running joke that, Serum Visions is Ancestral Recall, and with this card, we are one step closer to that actually being true. The big thing with this that I think everyone probably thought of pretty quickly when they saw it was Surveillance, right? So this basically has the potential to turn any fetch land in your deck into Surveil 1 draw a card, which is pretty exciting. There are other ways too that you can incidentally generate Surveil, like Dragon Rage's Channeler is like a pretty exciting one. Like if you assemble this combo of Dragon Rage's Channeler, becomes a really terrifying threat. It doesn't self-enable, and it's a 1/4 legend with no other abilities. So like, I don't know, but this is a really strong value engine. It's not gated behind once a turn, anything like that. So I do think that maybe there is a way to make this work, to make this card be pretty powerful. But it could also be a situation where the juice is not worth the squeeze. I'm not sure, but I really like the effect. The effect does seem very good, but it's possible that in Modern Highlander, we're not allowed to pay this much mana for this kind of effect. But a really grindy value engine is like the kind of card that I'm always going to kind of raise my eyebrows about and want to talk about. Memories Returning is a sorcery. It's 2 blue. It says reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put one in your hand, then choose an opponent. They put one on the bottom of your library, then put one in your hand. Then they put one on the bottom of your library. Then you put the other in your hand, and it flashes back for 7 blue. So essentially, this is reveal the top 5. You get the best one, the third best one, and the fifth best one, assuming your opponent plays correctly. So I think this is like a combo card for the decks that can make really a lot of mana. Like, I think that potentially some of the Academy decks like this card, and High Tide really likes this card. The sort of like Curb Your Enthusiasm decks might like this card. The thing about this that's particularly relevant is you always get the best of the 5 cards, and you're always getting 3 cards. So it is a good rate. And then flashing back is nice too. You can kind of use this earlier in the game to maybe help assemble whatever engine you're trying to build. And then maybe you've assembled either infinite mana, or in like the case of High Tide, like not infinite, but functionally infinite mana. And you're just looking for something to do with it. And the flashback on this will come into play as a thing to do. So I like this card. Sorry, I just bonked my cat in the head by accident. I like this card. I think it's reasonable. I don't think that it's going to like blow the doors off of anything. And I don't think this is a card that you want to necessarily be including in fair decks. The sorcery speed, the double blue pips, I think make it a little bit worse. Like Fact or Fiction is not a card that has been seeing a lot of play for a long time anyway. And this is better than Fact or Fiction in some shells, but not enough better, I don't think. But it's worth noting. And I think the combo decks in particular are probably interested in it. Okay, Valkyrie Aerial Unit is 5 blue for a 5/4 flyer, but importantly, it has affinity, and it's an artifact creature itself, and it has affinity for artifacts. And it says when this creature enters, Surveil 2, which is a nice little bonus. This is just an affinity card. There's a couple of little random ones in this set, actually. A couple of random nice affinity cards. This is an artifact itself, which is nice. One of the things about some of the affinity creatures that are like big like this, they're actually not artifacts themselves, like the serpent or whatever that can become unblockable. Like that one is just a creature, and so it's not helping to enable your other things. This one is. So and flying is like one of the more important keywords in those decks. You really like flying, and 5 is not a hard number to get to. So like blue for a 5/4 flyer with which is going to Surveil 2 on ETB. Great, really exciting. I think this is a card that is going to go into a bunch of the affinity decks pretty happily. Man, the video quality, the image quality is bad comparatively for some of these. I'm really sorry. So yeah, pretty simple. It's an affinity card. I think you will play it in the affinity decks and not much else. Cecile Dark Knight is or Cecil. Jesus. I am having trouble with the names. I'm so sorry. Is 1 black for a legendary creature, human knight with death touch. It has the ability Darkness. Whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life. Then, if your life is less than or equal to half your starting life total, untap Cecil and transform it. And I didn't include the transform side. I will for future ones. Sorry, I must have forgotten to here. But on the other side, it's a 4/4 with lifelink that says when it attacks, it gives your other creatures indestructible. So it's a powerful effect on the flip side. I think the determining factor for whether this card will be any good is, can you afford to go to 10 to have your 1-drop be turned on and effective? And are you willing to functionally like pay X life where X is the amount of damage that this card has done in order to get its effect? I think there are probably shells where the answer is yes. Black Mold is one that comes to mind. This card is hard to block too. It's going to trade a lot of the time, and if it's just trading, you're happy as well. Like the Death Touch means that it's a good defender. But time will tell whether or not the life loss is necessarily something you can afford. It's also worth noting that like if you drop below 10, you still need to connect with it in order to actually get the flip and turn it into a life linker to start like gaining your life back. You're not guaranteed to get to do that super cleanly. So that would be a thing that I would be anxious about were I playing this card. But I do think this card is powerful enough to be worth mentioning. I don't see myself sleeving it up all that often. Well, virtually sleeving it up. I don't play in paper very much anymore. But it's worth noting, I think. Now, Ninja's Blades, this is a card that I think it's not very good potentially, but this one is probably more in the I will probably die to this card category, but because it's me who will be trying to kill people with it, I put it in the possible playables. So this is a 2 and a black job select equipment, and it says equipped creature gets +1/+1, is a ninja, and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, then discard a card. That player loses life equal to the discarded card's mana value. I don't know. This card's probably not that good, but I really like the text box. I think it's pretty exciting. It again equips for 2. An important thing you will note in most of the equipments that I have highlighted here. So moving it over is not that hard. And so the job select, the hero token is a 1/1, and this gives what +1/+1. So it's a 3 mana 2/2. And I will be completely honest, like 3 mana 2/2, obviously not an exciting stat line. But the ability is quite strong. It's filtering, it's more pressure, which is pretty relevant as well. I don't know. I'm going to try it probably in some kind of evasive blue-black deck, like something that's trying to be more in on like a fairies, ninjas kind of build. And it'll probably be bad, and I'm probably wrong. But I I like this card. I wanted to talk about it. And I do think that it's also potentially a card that you will just die to. Like someone will play it and you won't have a way to block, and then they'll hit you. They'll discard a 5-drop. You'll take a bunch of damage out of nowhere, you know, and all of a sudden the game will become untenable. But yeah, do I see this one as a perennial format all-star? Obviously not. Resentful Revelation, I just wanted to flag this card. This is just a strict upgrade. So obviously we used to have this effect, which is 1 and a black. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in the hand, rest in your graveyard. This one flashes back for 6 and a black as well. Obviously we used to have this effect, and now we have it with flashback. So if you were playing that one, which I think like maybe some of the mono black storm lists were playing Ransack the Lab, now you probably either play both or you play this one instead. It just seemed worth noting. I know that there are certainly decks that will reach for the original printing of this, and this is just better. So yeah, power creep is alive and well. Then we have Summon Brynhildir. This is 1 and a red for a 2/1 enchantment creature, Saga Knight. Chapter 1 of this is Chain, which is exile the top card of your library. During any turn you put a lore counter on this saga, you can play this card. So that means you can play it right away. If you play it on turn 3 and you find a land, you can play the land, or on the next 2 turns you can play it as well, which is nice. So it kind of replaces itself in some ways. Obviously, if it dies, then you lose access to the card. And then chapters 2 and 3 are Gestalt mode. When you next cast a creature this turn, it gains haste till end of turn. So what's worth noting is that the templating of this doesn't say creatures you control this turn or creatures you cast this turn get haste. It's just the first one. But I do think that this kind of like give haste to things that weren't supposed to have haste effect is worth noting, and it's something like obviously we've seen with Arena of Glory, like I mentioned earlier, is a powerful effect. So I wanted to flag it, and I think that it's worth noting like this only ever gets to attack for 2, because it comes in 1 turn, doesn't get to attack the turn it enters. Turn 2, it triggers. You could attack with it if you want to, but then you might lose the 3rd chapter, and then the 3rd chapter resolves and it goes away. So you don't actually get that many attacks out of it as a 2/1. The fact that it is a creature honestly just kind of exposes it to more removal, but it replaces itself, which is nice. And I do think the haste is pretty decent. So I wanted to flag it. Next, we have Kefka, Court Mage. This is 2 and a blue, black, and a red for a legendary creature, human wizard. So this is a 5-drop. Obviously, 5-drops are a bit sketchy, but here we are. We're talking about another one. This one says, whenever Kefka enters or attacks, each player discards a card. Then you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. So, like, the nice thing about this is on ETB, this is always going to say, basically like you draw a card, because they're always going to discard something that has a card type. Maybe you get to draw 2 cards in the Magical Christmas Land where they discard like an artifact creature or something, but mostly you're just going to draw a card. But I do think that the fact that this is on enters and attacks is worth noting. So this is something where, like we talked about early on with Caracas, this is a way to not get completely annihilated by Caracas, because you're gonna play this and you're gonna draw a card. The 8 mana activation, I will briefly mention what the flip side looks like. I think you are unlikely to get to activate it very often, but it says each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice, so not great because they can choose anything. And then you get to flip Kefka. And then on the other side, Kefka is Kefka, Ruler of Ruin. This is a 5/7 flying avatar wizard that says whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards. So, if you flip it and get to attack, you're probably winning the game, but 8 mana is a lot of mana. So, yeah, I don't know. This is a card where, like, it costs 5, and I do think that there's something to be said about, like, are we really paying 5 to, cause your opponent to discard a card and you draw a card? I don't know. But there certainly are, like, really grindy Grixis decks that, like, might get up to 5 that might be interested in this. It at least does something on the turn it comes into play, and then threatens to ramp up the advantage as time goes on, which is nice. But I'm not certain it's great, but I wanted to flag it. I think it's a reasonable one. Next, oh my god, the image quality on some of these. Sorry, I should have gone through and updated some of these. So this is Emmett Selch, Unsundered. This is a legendary creature, Elder Wizard. A lot of wizards in this set. Cast for 1 blue and a black. It has Vigilance. It's a 2/4, and it says whenever Emmett enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform him. This turns into Hades, Sorcerer of Eld. This is a legendary creature avatar with Vigilance. It's a 6/6, and it says during your turn, you can play cards from your graveyard. Great. Very powerful. So I think the big thing with this card to note is it's nice for enabling graveyard stuff. The fact that it's on enters and attacks, again, helps with, like, that Caracas problem. And it is just like a reasonable stat line. 2/4 blocks pretty well. With Vigilance, it means you still get to attack and potentially trigger this effect. And getting to 14 or more cards in your graveyard, not actually that hard anymore with Surveil lands. Now, if you are taxing your graveyard in other ways with, like, Oculus or Delve spells, all these other kinds of things, yeah, it's going to take you a while for you to actually get up to 14. But it's kind of nice because this is a way to enable those things with the outlet of, maybe it turns into this kind of, like, permanent base, the Yawgmoth's Will, which obviously, like, if you get to do that with untapped mana, like, you gotta feel like you're likely to win the game. So I kind of like this as it's a very, like, high floor, high ceiling card. There's the floor on it is not that bad. The floor is, like, it's just this 2/4 that's gonna sift through your deck, help you kind of, like, get rid of cards that aren't very effective. And it does have this potential outlet where, your opponent is incentivized to interact with it eventually, because if it does get to flip it wins the game. Next, we've got Machinist's Arsenal. This is a 4 and a white equipment. This one decidedly should be the I'm going to die to this card. But again, I'm going to be the one trying to kill people with this card, so I put it in this section. So this is a 4 and a white job select artifact equipment that says equipped creature gets +2/+2 for each artifact you control and is an artificer in addition to its other types. Now it equips for 4. That's too much. You're not thrilled about equipped for 4. It is basically flavor text. I mean, occasionally I think you will be able to do it. And it's worth noting that in the deck that I'm envisioning playing this in, which is the affinity decks, the kind of, like, artifact aggro affinity decks, you're usually playing Tolarian Academy, which will help supplement the fact that 4 mana is an atrocious amount to spend. But +2/+2 for each artifact, and it itself is an artifact, means that this comes down as by default a 3/3. And in the artifact aggro decks, I don't think it's super hard to imagine you playing this and it being like a 12/12. So is a vanilla 12/12 that the power and toughness can be moved onto a flyer, is that good enough? I don't know. It's also worth noting, like, it's got a big colorless casting requirement, which is good if you want to be paying for it with, say, something like Mishra's Workshop. This is a powerful thing to be powering out with Workshop. You have room for very few 5-drops in these kinds of decks, and maybe this isn't one that it gets to get in there, but man, +2/+2, and you can move it onto a flyer. I mean, this is going to end games really quickly. If you can play this, and then you have some kind of a flying creature that you can move it onto, you're probably killing them that turn. So I do like it. I do think it is worth exploring, and again, it's another one of those kind of random affinity cards that's in this set. Golbez, Crystal Collector, is another one of these affinity cards. This is a blue-black legendary creature. It's a human wizard. A lot of wizards in this set. It's a 1/4. It says whenever an artifact you control enters, surveil 1. Worth noting, it's not cast, not non-token, so anything counts, which is nice if you were like doing shenanigans with foods. For example, like you could definitely go off with this. And then it says at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more artifacts, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts, each opponent loses life equal to that card's power. This is, I think, another nice grindy affinity card. Not very hard for you to have 4 artifacts in play if you're an affinity deck. And this allows you to do things like, make some trades with your creatures, get them back. Potentially, you're even going to get up to 8 where you're going to start dealing damage. But this is just something that I think it self-enables, because you can surveil creatures into the graveyard when artifacts enter. It's a nice advantage engine, which especially the Esper affinity deck and the Grixis affinity decks, those tend to play a little bit more of a controlling game, and this plays into that pretty well. You don't have a lot of room for non-artifact cards in the affinity decks, but this one is cheap, which is pretty relevant, and it really does help you go off. So I like this one. I can definitely see myself reaching for it. Next, we have Joshua, Phoenix's Dominant. This is a legendary creature, human noble wizard, another wizard, for 1 red-white. When Joshua enters, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. It's a 3/4, by the way. And for 3 red, white, and tap, you can exile Joshua, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery. And on the flip side, Joshua is Phoenix, Warden of Fire. This is a 4/4 flying lifelink legendary enchantment creature, Saga Phoenix. Chapters 1 and 2 are Rising Flames, which is that Phoenix deals 2 damage to each opponent. And it's worth noting that because it has lifelink, this is actually like a mini helix, so you are also going to gain 2 life each time. And then Flames of Rebirth is chapter 3, which is return any number of target creature cards with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, exile Phoenix, then return it to the battlefield, and then you actually get the ETB again, which is pretty reasonable. You get to do the discard again. So obviously the comparison for this card is Seasoned Pyromancer, a card that sees a decent amount of play, but what's worth noting is that Seasoned Pyromancer is red, not a mana cost that's like super exciting necessarily, unless you're exactly the medium red decks. And Seasoned Pyromancer is also like a 2/2, which is a relatively embarrassing stat line to pay 3 mana for these days. So being a 3/4 is nice for Joshua. And then the other thing is, it's worth noting, they did change the templating here so that you can't scam this card. With Seasoned Pyromancer, you could do something like on an empty hand, you play Seasoned Pyromancer, and it just says discard 2 cards and then draw 2 cards. You don't have 2 cards to discard, you just get to draw. With Joshua, and they've been doing this templating ever since Seasoned Pyromancer, basically, you draw as many cards as you discarded. So you do have to genuinely discard cards. But you're often going to have dead lands or just things that aren't particularly valuable in a matchup. I think like the Boros Taxis deck might be interested in this. Again, I think that the Boros actually got a couple of nice ones in this set, and this is another one. And it's also worth noting, like, the fact that it has an enters the battlefield ability means that, again, abilities like Caracas are less devastating. You are more allowed to play this card if it's going to do something, regardless of whether or not it gets bounced. And obviously, if you get to flip it, 5 mana is not like a totally unreasonable amount to plan to pay. And if you get to flip it, it is a pretty meaningful attacker, right? Like It flips, deals 2 damage, you gain 2 life, you get to block with it, then it deals 2 more damage, you get to attack with it, and then it's going to get back a bunch of stuff that you potentially discarded and flip back to being a 3/4. So a pretty nice one. I think it's a reasonable one for sure. Next, we've got Garland, Knight of Cornelia. This is a black-red legendary human knight. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Surveil 1, and then for 7 mana, 3 black, black, red, red, you can return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield transformed. And on the flip side, it's a 5/5 flyer that says when it dies, put it on the bottom of your library. I didn't include the flip because I could just tell you what it was. This is the Dragon's Race Channeler text, right? Cast a non-creature spell, get a Surveil. DRC is a card that we're pretty high on. That's a card that we include a lot. And actually, Black-Red is one of the decks that likes that card because it is a deck that otherwise is pretty low on filtering. So yeah, I think just by being a 3/2 by default is nice. Costing 2 instead of 1 is obviously a downside, but I like this card a lot. And I think that the ability comes up a lot. Getting to kind of filter with your creatures while you're casting your spells is great. So I would expect that this is one that we potentially do want to try and find a slot for in black-red especially. I could also see if you're playing like a Grixis deck, this card gets in pretty cleanly as well. It's just a solid filtering effect. I think that the transformability is largely flavor text, though I guess it will come up in really long grindy games potentially. Maybe the 2 toughness is too big of an issue. Maybe the 2 mana is too big of an issue. Like I said, a lot of these cards I feel like we're going to try, and they're either going to be like the 50th best card in the deck, and like you're going to include it, but it's not a card that you're going to say, oh, this is unbelievable. Or they're going to be 65th, and they get cut a lot of the time. Like I think that's the range for a lot of these things. And Garland's another one. Obviously, it's a legend. That's awkward. Again, I didn't want to belabor the point and say it all the time, but it is a legend, so that is something. But it's a good effect. We know that Surveil 1 on a non-creature spell is a good effect. So I can definitely see this one seeing play. Next, we have Buster Sword. This is a 3 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+2, and whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. You may cast a spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to that damage without paying its mana cost, and it equips for 2. Okay, so obviously, they gave us a good sword to pair with Cloud. If Cloud ever connects with this thing, it's great. you get to draw 2 cards, cast 2 5-drops potentially if they're in your hand. But more realistically, I think that this card is just a nice equipment to threaten your opponents with. It doesn't provide any protection, which is a problem. Usually that's something we want out of swords. But I could see this in a couple of shells. I actually think the Affinity deck is secretly maybe the better equipment deck in the format right now. And that deck really likes this kind of effect. It is always looking for more ways to cheat on mana, cheat more things into play, and to draw more cards. So that's quite good. I want to just try this and just see if the effect is powerful enough. 3/2 is a lot of stats. 5 extra stats for just the 2 equip is not bad. And if you ever do connect with this, like if you can get it onto a trampler or something like that, it is quite good. Drawing a card and generating mana is really powerful text to have on an equipment. But this one's on the low end for me. I would not be surprised if this one doesn't see any play at all, but it's just splashy enough that I thought it was worth mentioning. Okay, next we have Lysa Hexed. This is 1 white-blue for a legendary creature, human rebel monk. What's a rebel? Get our rebels deck going. As prowess, it says non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and then as long as you have cast 2 or more non-creature spells this turn, Lysa has double strike. So I brought this card up because I've been playing a bunch of the kind of like blue-white tempo taxes deck recently. It's a deck that's been popping up in a bunch of the online tournaments, and I played it on stream against Trent as well, and I was pretty impressed with it. And I do think this card goes into that deck. The cost reduction is really nice. Being able to play this and then on subsequent turns get a discount on the mana for casting those spells to trigger prowess is pretty big. I will say I'm not sure, like there is like a Jeskai prowess deck going around too. Like a YJ tournament was won by a kind of like bigger Jeskai deck that was doing a lot of prowessy things. and Lysa would be nice in that kind of deck as well. We are playing 3 mana for 2/2. It is a legend. Those things are awkward. But if you get to untap with this thing and you turn it sideways, it's pretty hard for your opponent to play around everything that you can have just because of the discount, and because of how big this creature can potentially get. So I like this one a lot, and having built-in double strike means that you can just play pump spells or just play protection spells. You don't actually need to find like the Teamer Battle Rage or anything like that. You can find ways to get this in and cracking for a lot of damage pretty quickly. Papelmo Totolimo is a white-black legendary creature dwarf wizard. This is you can see now we are in the commander decks, by the way. You can see the order in which I pulled cards. This is a 1/2 that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Paplamo deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. And then for 4, untap and sacking Paplamo, Papalimo, sorry. Each opponent who lost life this turn sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. So I flagged this one just because I think that casts trigger is kind of interesting, draining every time you cast a non-creature spell. It's not nothing. I'm not sure you play this card, but it's got like a bunch of interesting typing. Like being a wizard is kind of nice. Being a removal spell in a pinch is kind of nice. It's not doesn't have a very good body. It does have 2 toughness, which is nice. So it's not like dying to Orcish Bowmasters, but yeah, the drain ability seemed kind of interesting. It's like maybe innocuous enough that it's worth it. Hildebrand Manderville is a 1 and a white human detective that says creature tokens you control get +1/+1, and then when Hildebrand Manderville dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. And then on the adventure side, it's Gentleman's Rise. It's an instant adventure. Create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So the big thing about this is it's like ultra resilient, very hard to get rid of, because when it dies, you can just recast it as making a 2/2, and then you have it sitting in on an adventure, and you're able to recast it as the Anthem effect, which I think is pretty nice. And there are certainly some tokens decks that like having access to this sort of Anthem. So I like this card. It's flexible. It has the potential to just kind of like sit there. It's resilient. So in the grindier matchups, it's like a nightmare to get rid of. And it's just going to keep making multiple bodies, which I think is pretty interesting. It's not like absurd by any means. It's going to be like the 50th card in the tokens deck. But as the tokens decks go, getting access to another 2 mana Anthem that has nice additional text, I think is something that they'd be interested in. Observed Stasis is 3 and a blue for an enchantment aura. It has flash. It says enchant creature an opponent controls. When this aura enters, remove enchanted creature from combat, then draw a card for each tapped creature its controller controls. And then it says enchanted creature loses all abilities and can't attack or block. So this one is interesting. If you get to cast it when your opponent's attacking with like 2 or 3 creatures, and you can take the biggest one out of combat, and then you draw 2 or 3 cards, or maybe they've used mana dorks or something, and you get to enable it that way. I think this is actually like pretty exciting. Like 4 mana, instant speed, draw 2 cards, remove a threat, or draw 3 cards, remove a threat. Very playable card. I think time will tell whether we can afford to pay 4 mana for an enchantment-based removal spell, because obviously there are just random ways that this gets removed, or if your opponent can flicker the creature or bounce the creature back to their hand, then obviously this falls off. But the drawing the cards does, I think, make this pretty exciting. So I wanted to flag it. I don't know what we play it in. I could see this as a card that Simic Slaw might be interested in. That's a deck that oftentimes is going to have access to this kind of mana and wants to draw cards, and is also hurting for removal. You're often splashing in those decks for white, or I've seen people splash for red or black. You can kind of splash with any of the colors, but getting more removal spells that only take a single blue pip definitely feels like something that might be kind of worth exploring. Transpose, this is kind of an interesting one. So this is 2 and a black for an instant that says draw a card, then discard a card. You lose 1 life. If this spell was cast from your hand, create a 0/1 black wizard token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell. This token deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then it has rebound. So these are like the little like black mages, like little black wizards that are going to ping your opponent. And there are a bunch of cards in this set that make them. This is one of the ones that I think is better. There's also the one black edict that makes a little wizard, and I didn't include that one. I thought about doing so, but ultimately chose not to. I think that one is just on the edge, on the outside looking in. But yeah, so this one, it's going to help you kind of like filter through your draws. I really wish it just drew you a card. The discarding a card is a bummer. You really wish this just generated advantage. But this basically like makes a 0/1, and then on the next turn, it triggers it right away. And if you are looking for like a kind of control card that also has a built-in finisher of sorts, I mean, obviously you're not planning to cast 20 spells, but just making innocuous other material that is going to, deal damage, potentially block, potentially get sacrificed to other things if you're doing that sort of thing, I think is interesting. And being an instant is the big reason why I can see this one potentially getting it. It's just not that easy to come by instant speed card draw in black, and you are sometimes going to want to be holding up removal spells or things of that ilk, and this is something to do in the spots where you don't want to cast the removal. Ardbert, Warrior of Darkness, is a 1 white-black legendary creature spirit warrior. It's a 2/2. It says whenever you cast a white spell, put a 1/1 counter on each legendary creature you control. They gain vigilance till end of turn. And then it says whenever you cast a black spell, put a 1/1 counter on each legendary creature you control. They gain menace until end of turn. So it's a grower, right? Like if you put this in your black-white deck, it's just going to grow every time you cast a spell, and it's going to incidentally grow your other creatures. It's a 2/2 legend. That's awkward, but this one is firmly in the camp of if this sits in play, you're just going to die to it pretty quickly. Particularly like if you have another legend in play, like even just one other legend, and you get to go play this, and then on the next turn play like white spell, black spell, hit you for like 8 vigilance menace, and you're still blocking in matchups where you're doing a lot of attacking and blocking. This is going to be a bit of a house. I also thought about this card in the Abzan counters deck, and spoiler alert, there are a lot of +1/+1 counters matters cards in the later part of the set review. But this one, if you ever get to do something where you're doubling the amount of counters that are getting put on things, gets out of hand really quickly. It's worth noting, like, it's only on to legendary creatures, so you're not going to put it on everything. It's not going to be like completely overrunning your opponent, but I think it's interesting, and I do think it's worth trying. This is one that I'll be playing, and we'll see. The time where growing creatures were really powerful in Highlander, I think, was sort of like has kind of come and gone. Like, we're not playing Chasm Skulker or Mana Gorge or Hydra anymore. These creatures that start below rate, but that kind of quickly become above rate creatures. Like, that's not a thing that we necessarily get to do because the format has sped up. But this one, because it provides other keywords and because it pumps your whole team, I think is something that we maybe get to play. Blue Mage's Cane is 2 and a blue for an equipment job select. It says equipped creature gets +0/+2, is a wizard in addition to its other types, and has whenever this creature attacks, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery from defending player's graveyard. If you do, copy it. You may cast the copy by paying 3 rather than paying its mana cost. I don't know about this card. It only equips for 2. Again, you will notice a theme of these ones. I gravitated towards the ones that equip for 2 mostly. This one's pretty sweet, right? If you get to exile something high impact, paying 3 colorless, you're often going to be paying more than the spell actually costs. But depending on what the spell is, you might not care. And I just thought that this card was worth flagging. It is unfortunate that only hits defending player. Like, if this turned your creature into a Dreadfort Arcanist, then obviously it would be like bonkers absurd. But even as this effect, I think it's potentially kind of interesting. You can move it around, which is nice too. The fact that it only attacks as a 1/3 means that you better hope that the thing you're exiling is helping the creature stay alive or is doing something else pretty high impact. But even if you attack with this, only get to cast a spell, and then the colorless hero that was attached to it dies, I mean, it only costs 2 to re-equip it, so you can move it around and use it in grindier matchups. Decks that I could see playing this card, that's the part where it gets a little foggy for me. Like, this one is decidedly, I think, in the, I don't know. This is why I titled this section Possible Playables. Like, maybe Maybe you might try playing this card in like a blue red control deck, or I could see yourself trying to play this in like a Bant aggro, where this is one of your equipment. I'm not 100% sure. It's just a powerful enough effect that I think it's kind of interesting. Like the magical Christmas land of like, I cast this, I get to steal my opponent's time walk, or like their ancestral recall is obviously like a high fantasy thing to want to do. But even just doing something like, play this and then on the next turn make some attacks, cast a lightning bolt out of their graveyard, or cast a Thoughtseize out of their graveyard is not nothing either. So I don't know. We'll see about this card. And I feel like I found myself saying, I don't know about a lot of things from this set. And I think that is kind of how I feel. The power level for most of these cards is really, it's lower than I expected. And like I said, I think that these cards are going to be in like the 50 to 65 range of cards in your deck. Okay, we're on to the Mardu, the Mardu Commander deck. So this is Terra, Herald of Hope. This is red, white, black for a legendary creature, human wizard warrior with the ability Trance. At the beginning of combat on your turn, mill 2 cards, Terra gains flying until end of turn. Whenever Terra deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2. When you do, return target creature with power 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this is like, it lets you unearth basically on combat damage when you pay 2. It's going to attack with flying all the time. It is a wizard. It is a legend. Well, it's a wizard as well. It's a legend that doesn't have an ETB, so that's a little sketchy. But the payoff is really high. It also self-enables, which is nice. So I think you could kind of just put this in like a Mardu mid-range deck. And I don't think that you necessarily need to work very hard to enable the power 3 or less part of it. That's just going to happen a lot of the time. Some big ones that you can think of right away that are pretty exciting are like, you get back like Solitude, Grief, our big targets, Fury even. So obviously all the invocations are like, or not invocations, but all of the elementals are pretty exciting to get back. But there's just a lot of creatures that are going to have 3 power or less that end up in your graveyard that you're going to be happy enough to get back with Terra. Orcish Bowmasters. There's going to be lots of spots where Barrogoyf is still only 3 power potentially. So card's very good. I think that it generates a lot of advantage. It is one of these things where it has to survive a turn cycle, and that is going to mute its power level. It also notably does not cast well off of Arena of Glory because it has the mana cost of red, white, black. So that's a bit sketchy, but it has flying. So like, I'm not super worried about the 3/3 power and toughness. Like, you're going to get in that way. I think that, like, people have been playing these kind of like Mardu aggro mid-range decks, and I think this card slides right into those very happily. You're going to find a slot for it. Yeah, it's quite good. Similarly, Celeste Rune Knight is a 1 red, white, black legendary creature, human wizard knight. When it enters, you discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards +1, which is nice. So it's actually gaining you advantage, which is cool. And then whenever one or more creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So this is a super powerful effect. Obviously, the synergy with Terra is really apparent, but I mean, you can just play value reanimates in these Mardu shells anyway. You probably would play Unearth, you can play Helping Hand, you can play Animate Dead, you could pay a point and play actual reanimate. And getting to Anthem your whole team when you cast one of those spells is a really, really nice payoff for this card. It also self-enables, so if you have things in your hand, you can cast this to discard them and to find those reanimation style effects. This one does cast well off Arena of Glory, although it doesn't have an attack trigger, so it's not quite as exciting. But I like this one a good amount. Obviously, like, you can dream up the magical Christmas land where you're like bloodgasting every turn, and maybe in Aristocrats, that's a thing you could think about. But generally, I think that this is just a 4/4 that basically like wheels you +1, which is nice. It's already good. You can just get rid of your bad cards, put your good cards, and draw new cards. And then you're going to incidentally trigger that second clause a decent amount of the time. So similarly in these kind of, oh yeah, if you like scam a Grief or an Ephemerate, or with not with an Ephemerate, but with like the Feign Death effects, that's good too. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. Like, it doesn't have to be cast, it can just enter. So yeah, I think again, in those kinds of shells that are looking to do those things, I really like this card. I think it could be quite powerful. Next, we've got Setzer, Wandering Gambler. This is 1 black red for a 2/2 human rogue pilot. I know our friend Jason was lamenting that this isn't a pirate, which is fair. He really wants to build pirates. When Setzer enters, create the Blackjack. Come on, this is a pirate ship. A legendary 3/3 colorless vehicle artifact token with flying and crew 2. When a vehicle you control deals damage to a player, flip a coin. Whenever you win a coin flip, create 2 tapped treasure tokens. So this is basically like a 3/3 that creates, or sorry, a 3 mana 2/2 that creates a vehicle that it can pilot itself, which is quite good. If it dies, the vehicle sticks around as something that your subsequent creatures can pilot, which I think is pretty nice as well. The second and third lines on this card, where you're flipping coins and maybe making tapped treasures, like not quite flavor text because he self-enables those things, but you're not going to be trying to find other ways to flip coins in your deck or anything like that. You might play one other vehicle, I guess. Like you probably will have Smuggler's Copter in your deck as well. So maybe you'll get more than one more than one activation of the second part, but I wouldn't be reading this card with that in mind. But honestly, just as a 2/2 that leaves behind a 3/3 vehicle, like that's already kind of interesting as a rate, I think. And is a card that I would be interested in trying. So that's why I flagged it. Okay, we have Shadow Mysterious Assassin. This is 2 and a black for a human assassin with Death Touch. It has the ability Throw. When Shadow deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice another non-land permanent. If you do, draw 2 cards and each opponent loses life equal to the value of the sacrificed permanent. So the draw 2 cards part of this is I think the one that I'm particularly drawn towards. I think that in the dream scenario, you're like sacrificing like a Gurmag Angler and you're killing them or something, but that's probably not happening very often. But more realistically, this has Death Touch, so it's a bit hard to block. They're not going to love throwing a larger creature in front of it. And the getting to just like sacrifice like a clue or a treasure or a food token that you have lying around and turning it into 2 cards is awesome. They're really potent effect. And the black-red deck does have this secondary game plan where it is just kind of trying to generate a bunch of game objects. Like you are playing like Valderan Epicure in that deck just because it generates multiple game objects for things like Broadside Bombardiers. And this is another thing that lets you lean into generating those objects. So I like this card. I think that if you can start to generate advantage with it, you're going to be really happy. Can definitely see it in black-red. Could also see it in other aggressive black decks. Like I think maybe like the green-black, like the Black Mold deck might be interested in this card. That's a deck that sometimes has creatures that end up not really being useful on the board anymore. It has a couple of mana dorks too that you could potentially eat to turn into 2 cards. And it's nice that it's a not a non-token. It just has to not be a land. So you got lots of options. Next, we have Gao, Feral Youth. This is a legendary creature, human berserker. It has for 1 and a red. It has the ability Rage. When Gao attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then at the beginning of each end step, if a card left your graveyard this turn, Gao deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So very strong second text box, not the easiest to enable. Things that you can do to enable it are obviously Reanimation, Delve. You can also do things like Raise Dead effects, like even if you just pick up a card from your graveyard and put it back in your hand, that's gonna trigger Gao. So, that's something to think about as well. I think realistically, this is a 2 mana 2/2 that gets to attack for 3 and then 4 and then 5, which is nice. I think you're already pretty interested in that as a red deck. And notably, if you can find some way to like become immense this thing, that's obviously really exciting. Like that to me was like the big payoff synergy that I could think of off the bat was you get to become immense it, you trigger the second ability, and you're probably dealing 10 to your opponent or 9 to your opponent right away, which is pretty exciting. That's a strong effect. So this is a card that I can definitely envision ending some games pretty quickly. you have to jump through some hoops to get the really powerful part out of it. But the floor of just attacking as a 3/3, then attacking as a 4/4, then attacking as a 5/5, I think is good enough. I don't think that you necessarily need to be working really, really hard to trigger the second part of this. That said, I think more aggressive versions of Black-Red would be interested in this. I think like the Green-Red Blitz decks, maybe Green-Red Monsters would be interested in this as well. Lots of those things, I think, where you could see this seeing play. It's a nice one. Next, we have Sabin, Master Monk. This is a 4 and a red legendary creature, a human noble monk with double strike. It also has Blitz, and the Blitz cost is 2 red, discard a card. And then it has the you may cast this card from your graveyard using its Blitz ability effect, which is nice. And just a reminder on what Blitz does. It says, if you cast this card for its Blitz cost, it gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card, and you sacrifice at the end step, at the beginning of the end step. So you're probably not casting this for 5 very often, but blitzing this into play, because it draws a card when it dies, means that the discard a card part of it is offset at least a little bit. And this is just a 8-ball coming in at your opponent every turn. And not that many decks are going to have super clean ways to block a 4/3 double striker that doesn't cost them a card. Like, there are lots of decks that are going to be able to throw stuff under the bus because it doesn't have trample, which is an issue. But just as this kind of like recursive threat that can just come back every turn, like that's going to be annoying for some decks to deal with. I think the kind of medium red decks might be interested in this sort of effect, and I could see other decks wanting it too. But yeah, like maybe monsters might want something like this as well. Just being a card that is really annoying from the graveyard, I think is worth flagging with this one. Okay, next we've got Cloud X Soldier. This is 2 red, green, white for a legendary creature, human soldier mercenary. It has haste. When Cloud enters, attach up to 1 target equipment to it. Whenever Cloud attacks, draw a card for each equipped attacking creature you control. Then, if Cloud has 7 power or greater, create 2 treasure tokens. So the really obvious synergy here with Cloud is the Buster Sword. Obviously, you play the Buster Sword, you curve it into Cloud, and then you're attacking with a 7 power Cloud that they really want to block because they don't want to take 7 and have you draw a card and cast a potential 7 drop out of your hand. But I think this is one of the first ones where I have this in the possible playables section, I guess. But really, I think we're starting to get into the category of I'm going to die to this card, or maybe this only goes in 1 deck. Basically, I kind of think there might be a Naya equipment deck out there after this set drops. We got a bunch more equipment, which is really nice. There are a bunch of cards that care about equipment, and a lot of the job select equipments, they're good in that they are equipment, but they're also creatures, so they can do both. They can hold new equipments, they can hold old equipments that were left behind while also enabling some of your bigger payoffs that care about having equipments in play. So Cloud having haste is obviously one of the bigger things. You really, really want to have an equipment in play when he enters, because just being a 5-mana 4/4 haste is underwhelming. But if you can equip him with something on ETB and get in there, it's quite good indeed. I think it could be a potent attacker for sure. So I like Cloud. I think he doesn't necessarily go in many existing decks, maybe like a Naya aggro deck with a Stoneforge Mystic package, but he's a little awkward there because you really do want to have the equipment in play to attach. Next, we have Sephiroth, Fallen Hero. This is 3 white, red for a human avatar soldier. It has the ability Genova Cells. Whenever Sephiroth attacks, you may put a cell counter on target creature. Until end of turn, each modified creature you control has base power and toughness 7/5. And it's worth noting, modified is equipment or as you control counters. Those are the things that qualify as modifications. And then he also has the ability The Reunion, which is 3, sacrifice a modded creature, return this creature from the battlefield to the battlefield tapped. So this is a card that I think goes kind of crazy in maybe like the token shells. It's something where if you can start to get this going and mod up a couple of tokens and turn them into 7/5s, it's great. And it's very hard to remove once it's in play, because if it gets to attack once, then it's already created a modified creature to sacrifice to bring back subsequently. It only costs 3 to bring back a 7/5. You know, it's going to trade off. So I like this card. I think that it has the potential to really grind out some games in a scary way. And it is just a large, very, very large creature. Next, we have Elena, Turk Recruit. This is 2 and a white for a human assassin. It's a 1/4. And Elena says, when Elena enters, return target non-assassin historic card from your graveyard to your hand. And then it says, whenever you cast a historic spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Elena. I think this is another affinity card. It's a really nice one. This is a value card, but then it's like your value card that then also just gets bigger every time you cast most spells in your deck, because most of your spells in those decks are going to be historic. So I like it. It comes into play, gets something back, and then keeps growing. Not much more to say. Like I said, there were a bunch of random affinity cards kind of peppered in throughout this set, and this is another good one. We have Vincent, Vengeful Atoner next. This is 2 and a red for a legendary creature, Assassin. It's a 3/3 with Menace. It says, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on Vincent, and then it has a second ability that is a multiplayer ability. So we won't worry about that one. This one is just a grower that grows no matter who deals damage. So we have, like, this is going way back, but like Falcon Wrath Noble is like a card that we used to play. And one of the big issues with it is that card couldn't snowball if it didn't get going really early on, because it itself needed to do the attacking. But Vincent's kind of nice in that it comes down, you play it pre-combat, you attack. If they don't block, it automatically becomes a 4-mana or 4/4 menace. Already great. Then on your next turn, you get to attack with it. It probably becomes a 5/5, because blocking a 4/4 menace is not easy. So this is just a card that snowballs pretty quickly. It is a pretty good hit off of something like, say, like a Mana Crypt start. Getting this into play, it's going to attack for 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, and it's going to potentially get out of hand pretty quickly. So yeah, I like it in some of the red decks. We'll see. Time will tell whether it's like long-term playable, but Menace is, I think, a nice keyword and a pretty essential one. Avalanche of Sector 7 is also 2 and a red. It's a human rebel, legendary creature. It has Menace. It says Avalanche of Sector 7's power is equal to the number of artifacts your opponent controls. And it says whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact they control, Avalanche of Sector 7 deals 1 damage to that player. Notably, this does not say non-mana ability. So if your meta is being run by affinity decks or things like that, or Time Vault as well, similar, this is a really nice hate bear against those kinds of decks. It's probably worse than Harsh Mentor just because it's not as flexible. But if you know that you're going to be playing against a bunch of artifact decks and you're tired of losing to them, which fair enough, this is a pretty insane one against those decks. And notably, like, it puts pressure 2 ways, right? Like, if your opponent is on Academy and they've got 5 artifacts in play, well, this is just a 3-mana 5/3. And if they spend their artifact mana or activate their artifacts developing, they're going to take a bunch of damage. And it really, like, you have to, if you're the artifact player, not develop so much that this gets to get a big attack in and then you lose the ability to activate half your artifacts. So I like this card as a hate bear. Like, you probably aren't going to just necessarily main deck this on its own, because a lot of the time it's going to be a 0/3 and that's not great. But this is a specific one to reach for, I think, where if you are losing to the artifact decks too much, this is definitely something that you could reach for. Wrecking Armball is a 2-mana equipment. It says equipped creature has base power and toughness 7/7 and can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Equips for 7. It equips to a legendary creature for 3. I put this one up here just because, like, this is worse than Colossus Hammer, but it's not that much worse. And, like, maybe again, like, we're getting to this point where there's like an equipment matters deck. Notably, this one also plays well with Cloud, making him a 7/7 right away. But yeah, I don't think that this card necessarily slots into any particular deck right away. But we could Sigarda's this card, and maybe that would be good. I could definitely see, if the equipment deck is real, this being another one that we would potentially want to get in it. Because if you had, like, like Pure Steel Paladin going as well, like, just being able to move something like this around cheaply is quite good. Obviously, if you can't move it around cheaply, it's not going to be very powerful or anything like that. So it's not going to just go in any regular deck. But in the Equipment Matters deck, I do like it. Okay, we have hit the maybe in one deck section. And honestly, we were probably at the maybe in one deck section for a while. I do think that like some of these, like this is maybe in one deck. This is maybe in one deck. Yeah, a few of these were maybe in one deck, but that's fine. Put this together kind of quickly. So the Wandering Minstrel, this is blue-green for a legendary creature, human bard. It says lands you control enter untapped. Then it has the ability, the Minstrel's Ballad. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more towns, create a 2/2 elemental creature token that's all colors. And then it has another ability that is 3 and Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, green. Other creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of towns you control. So we don't care about the second 2 lines of text on this card. The reason why I kind of put this one in the set review is this is another effect that says lands you control enter untapped. And I think this is number 3, maybe. We have Amulet of Vigor, Spelunking, and now this. And that's still probably not quite enough to be doing combo stuff with it. But it is just worth noting, we keep getting more and more cards that enable doing shenanigans with bounce lands, right? So this is another card where if you combine like this bounce land and fast bond, and then, you know, like you need something to do with the mana, but it is infinite mana of whatever colors well, it's not quite infinite because you'll die to the fast bond, but it's a lot of mana of whatever colors the bounce land makes. And I think that is interesting and just worth keeping an eye on. Every time a card like this gets printed, I try to make sure I'm like mentally flagging it, because I do think we're probably still a little low on the number of effects to make like a true Amulet Titan kind of style deck work, but we got to be getting there. We got to be getting close. Next, we've got Kuja, Genome Sorcerer. This is a legendary creature, human mutant wizard. This is 2 and a black-red for a 3/4. It says, at the beginning of your end step, create a tapped 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell. This token deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then if you have 4 or more wizards, you get to transform Kuja. And on the flip side, they are a 4/6 avatar wizard that has the ability Flame Star. If a wizard you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So this comes down, it makes another creature right away. Well, it makes another creature if it makes it to your end step, which is nice. And then, like, there are a lot of wizards. You don't necessarily need to flip this with just the effect from it itself making wizards. Like, I think that it's not totally unreasonable for you to have played 1 or 2 other ones in the interim. This could flip the turn it comes into play. More realistically, it's going to flip the turn after it comes into play. The little black mages, like the black wizard tokens, are mostly just like bonus, I think, and they are going to matter. Like if you make 2 and you flip this thing, all of a sudden like casting 2 spells or 3 spells is going to deal a ton of damage. And this does attack for 8 functionally, because it doubles its own damage. So it's a 4/6, but it secretly deals 8 damage, which is not nothing at all. So yeah, I like this card. I could definitely see it. Judge Magister Gabranth. This is a black-white 2/2. It's a human advisor knight. It has menace. It says whenever another creature or artifact you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this seems like maybe it's an aristocrats card, maybe it's an affinity card. I don't know, like aristocrats doesn't necessarily want to be putting counters on something. This also does just get bigger through the course of battle. Like as things happen in the game, it's going to get larger. So I could see it maybe being playable. But it's not like it's not a card that I'm looking at as like a crazy bomb or anything, but I thought I would flag it. It's the one deck I think you might see it in is like, I do think you could maybe see playing it in aristocrats or something like that. The Emperor Palamechia is Palamecia, Jesus, is a blue-red human noble wizard. It's a legendary creature, and it has the ability add blue or red, spend this mana to cast a non-creature spell, and then it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if 4 mana was spent to cast it, put a +1/+1 counter on Emperor of Palamechia. Then if it has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, You transform it. And I will say that I don't think that the transform part of this is likely to come up very often. Spending 4 mana is not something we like doing very often, especially on spells. The reason I noted this card is because I like the fact that it adds mana that isn't super strictly locked. Like non-creature spell is a lot more generous than a lot of the times that this mana is locked behind instant or sorcery or instant and sorcery. So that's nice. On the flip side, it's a 3/3 that says when the Lord Master of Hell, which is what this flips into, attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of non-creature, non-land cards in your graveyard, which is great. I mean, if you can flip this, it's obviously quite powerful. And maybe you could play like a rug +1/+1 counters matters deck and fit this card in somewhere. But I don't think the flip side is super important. But this is like it is a mana dork in colors that don't typically get mana dorks. And I don't think that matters, but I just wanted to flag it. Shantoto, Tactician Magician, is a 1 blue-red dwarf wizard. It's a 0/4, and it says when you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +X+0 until end of turn, where X is the amount of mana used to cast that spell. And then if X is 4 or more, draw a card. So this is like Prowess Plus, and I think the Prowess decks like this card. Obviously, it doesn't pair well with like your Mishra's Baubles or your Mutagenic Growths because you are paying 0 mana for those things. But it is a lot better with more expensive spells, which is obviously. I think you're unlikely to be drawing cards all that often, but I think a lot of the times you're going to be playing like, you know, you're going to be spending 3 mana or 4 mana on spells on the subsequent turn, which means that this is going to attack as a 4/4 and potentially as even bigger. And it's a wizard, which means like for purposes of Flame of Venor, things like that, which are cards that the blue-red Prowess deck likes, it is enabling those as well. So I like that one. I think it's pretty good. Next, I mentioned there were going to be some counters matters cards, and we have arrived. So we have Gata and Luzu. This is a 2 and a white legendary creature, human soldier. It has flash, and it says when Gata and Luzu enters, choose target creature you control. If damage will be dealt to that creature this turn, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. You can choose itself, worth noting. So you can play this, target itself, make a block, and then put counters on this equal to the amount of damage that it would have received, which is great. Or you can use it to save another creature from damage. And it's worth noting it's not combat damage, so this will also save it from like a lightning bolt or something of that ilk. And yeah, I think that's potentially pretty interesting. It gets especially interesting when you get to start like doubling the counters or doing things that really care about the +1/+1 counters. But this style effect I'm always kind of a sucker for, these kind of like flash creatures that save another creature or get bigger depending on the amount of damage they prevented. I am just a sucker for them. And this is another one in the list. Shalinda Yevon Acolyte, is a green-white 2/2 human cleric with lifelink that says whenever another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature if its power is less than Shalinda's. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on Shalinda. So this is a creature that either grows or grows your creatures that are entering. And in the +1/+1 counters matters decks, if you have counters doubler going, awesome, right? Really starts to get out of hand quickly. So this is a card that I think will definitely get included in those decks. This one is high enough power level that you might just play it. Like I think Green-White Little Kid would play this card very happily. And maybe other Green-White X aggro decks would put this card in their deck too. It's not always a Lord. Sometimes it itself is growing. Lifelink is nice text to have, really further stomping out Mono Red's potential to exist with just like stapling Lifelink to more and more things. So yeah, I like that card a lot. I think it's going to be pretty good. It's funny I have it listed in the only in one deck category, but actually this one should have gone in the possible playables category. But it just all these cards are from the +1/+1 counters commander deck, so I left it here. Protection Magic. I think this card is awesome. So this is 1 and a white for an instant. It says put a shield counter on each of up to 3 target creatures. If a creature with a shield counter would be dealt damage or destroyed, you remove the counter from it instead. So what this does is it basically lets you, for 2 mana, protect a bunch of things. And obviously we've had like effects that have said your creatures gain indestructible until end of turn or whatever, like for 2 mana. That's normal. In green especially, we have like heroic intervention or whatever. Like those are effects that we've had. What I really like about this is that you can do this proactively. So if your opponent taps out and they don't do something to threaten your creatures, you can just still put shield tokens on them and then untap and go about your business, knowing that they have at least one layer of protection. You lose the blowout potential, potentially. What a sentence. You lose the blowout potential, but in exchange, you just don't have to hold up your protection spell. You get to just start doing other things with your mana, which I think is huge. I think that actually makes it a big difference. I'm currently working on a heroic deck, a couple of them actually, a couple of different color combinations, but obviously all of them include white. And this is a card that I am very excited to include in those decks. So I look forward to that. Oh, I gotta sneeze. 1 sec. Save you all from that. I do have a tendency to scream sneeze a little bit. Okay, so yeah, protection magic, great one, love it. I think this one's going to be really interesting. And to be honest, both of these cards, both of Shalinda and protection magic, should have gone in the possible playables category. I actually think protection magic is one of the more exciting cards from the set, but I put it here because there's been a lot going on. Okay, more +1/+1 counters matters cards. This is Meister Seymour. This is 2 and a green for a human elf cleric, a legendary creature. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Meister Seymour's power on another target creature you control. And then for 5, 3 green, it has Monstrosity X, where X is the number of counters among creatures you control. So that says if this creature isn't monstrous, put X +1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. So you play this, you put a counter on something else. The next turn, you put a counter on something else. You can activate monsters at any time. So basically, this should be getting at least 2 counters. And realistically, in the decks that want to be playing this card, there's going to be a lot of +1/+1 counters flying around. So it's not super hard to imagine this coming down and chucking a couple of counters around. Maybe you're really lucky and you've got like a Winding Constrictor or Hardened Scales going, and this is adding 2 counters to things at the same at a time. And then you get to monstrous it, and it itself becomes like a massive threat, and it has counters that care about your synergies as well, right? So monstrosity, if you have like Hardened Scales going, it's going to benefit from that as well. So really powerful effect, very sweet. Think it's quite good. Yuna's Whistle. This is 1 green for a instant that says reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card into your hand and the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. When you reveal a creature card this way, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the mana value of that card. So if you hit a 1-drop, it's pretty awkward. But if you even just hit a 2-drop, draw a card, put 2 counters on something is probably fine in this deck. And especially if you have the counter doublers going, it's very good. One of the reasons why just being able to assign counters, like 2 or 3 counters, is great is things like Walking Ballista or the Market Back Walker or Hanger Back Walker, they all really want to accumulate counters quickly. Now, obviously, the existence of those 3 0-drops that I just talked about make Yuna's Whistle worse, so that's something to keep in mind, but it's a sweet effect. Next, we have Trommel Seymour's Butler. This is 2 and a green for a legendary creature, Elf Advisor. It says each non-token creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then for 1 and tapping it, you can proliferate X times, where X is the number of non-creature tokens you control that entered this turn. So most of the time, this is probably saying like proliferate 1, you play a creature, you proliferate. If you can ever do something like play multiple creatures and get to proliferate twice, you're going to be really chilling. And, if you have like Mana Dorks in this deck or other 1-drops that you can use, that's going to be really powerful. If you can set up a turn where you play this, and then maybe on the subsequent turn, you go like 1-drop, 2-drop, proliferate twice, and now all of a sudden you played like an Esper Sentinel that came in as a 2/2, then got double proliferated up to being a 4/4, and then some other 2-drop that also just got 3 extra counters. You're going to take over some boards really quickly. So this green-white tokens deck, and I think even like maybe Abzan, it's definitely a deck that people have been playing already. There are definitely lists out there, and I think that it's an interesting deck, and I really do think that with this commander deck, it's gotten decidedly a lot of juice. There's a lot of good, powerful cards that have been added. And I've realized just now that I meant to add a card to this slideshow and I didn't. So I'm just going to talk about it now. And we're just going to have to pretend that it's up there. I will describe it to you perfectly. So the other card for this deck that I forgot to include is Zac Fair. This is 1 white for a 0/1 human soldier legendary creature. Zac Fair enters with a +1/+1 counter on it, and then has the ability 1 mana, sacrifice Zac Fair. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Put Zac Fair's counter on that creature and attach an equipment that was attached to Zac Fair to that creature. Don't think we care about the equipment part all that much in this deck theoretically, but that's a really nice one. Like if you get to go Hardened Scales, play him as a 2/3, and then later on down the line sack him to protect something, move counters over, which by the way, I think will additionally get triggered by certain things, or at least it would, activate the Ozolith, things like that. That's a really nice one. That's a great protection card for this shell as well. The last of the cards from this commander deck that I wanted to talk about, I actually think are the weakest. So these are the legends that come from this commander, or some of the legends that the commanders that come from this commander deck. The first one is Yuna, Grand Summoner. This is 1 green, white, blue for a legendary creature, human cleric. Has the ability Grand Summon, which is tap, add 1 mana of any color. When you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. And then whenever another permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you may put that number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. All of these text boxes are great. They're very reasonable. This just costs 4, and Bant, I think, is slightly worse as the counters colors than either straight green, white, or Abzan, I think are the colors you would probably prefer to be. If you are playing Bant +1/+1 counters, I got to imagine you're probably playing this card. You get to put it in play, and all of a sudden, it has to die before anything else you have in play dies, because otherwise it's kind of all for naught, right? Worst case, the counters end up on it, but potentially they end up somewhere else. And yeah, I think that it's interesting. It's just expensive, and I think it's kind of not in the right colors. Similarly, Titus Yuna's Guardian is green, white, blue for a 3/3 that says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. And then it has the ability Cheer, which is whenever 1 or more creatures you control with counters on them deal combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and proliferate. So it's good. You get to pump things up. Proliferating on combat damage means that your board is going to keep growing. If you are lucky and you maybe get to generate some shield counters some ways, then you get to start making extra shield counters, which is very good. It's just, again, it's not in the right colors. It doesn't do anything on ETB. It does do something on when it at the beginning of combat, I guess, which is nice. And moving counters might be good. Like I said, we want to be moving counters onto like hanger back walkers or market back walkers, things like that. And then, yeah, I think other than that, it's just okay, but I don't think it's terrible. Next we've got Kimahri, Valiant Guardian. This is 2 green, blue for a legendary creature, Cat Warrior. It's a 3/3 with vigilance, and it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it and tap target creature an opponent controls. Then you may have Kimahri become a copy of that creature, except it keeps all its abilities and has vigilance and this ability. So pretty interesting, right? Like it becomes a 4/4 right away. It taps something down, so it helps with attacking. The transforming might be good. I mean, it can't be bad, I think. You don't have to do it. And what's worth noting is even if there's nothing else on the board, you do just get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So again, if you have one of those counter doublers, this does just become a 5/5 right away and then a 7/7, which is good. The one thing about this is, like, again, it costs 4. It's a legend. And it's in the wrong colors again. But maybe these cards make you want to play blue instead. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly talk about these cards. Okay, last couple of cards. We can tell I switched back to using better quality images here. These are just another couple where I think they're probably not good enough unless they're going in very specific shells. So the first one is Raubon, Bull of Alamigo. This is 1 in a red for a 2/2. It's a legendary human warrior. It has ward, pay life equal to Raubon's power. And then whenever Raubon attacks, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to target attacking creature. So this is a nice one with the potential equipment matters deck. It's another way to attach equipment for free, which is interesting. So like this can pick up a Colossus Hammer, for example, and then all of a sudden it becomes like a 12/12 that costs 12 to target, which is pretty exciting. But outside of that, I don't see a lot of shells for it. And then we've got Van Street Thief. This is 2 and a red, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this card. It's 2 and a red for a 2/2 human scout, not a pirate. I don't know why. That says whenever 1 or more scouts, pirates, and or rogues you control deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library. You may cast it. If you don't, create a treasure token. And then whenever you cast a spell you don't own, put a 1/1 counter on each scout, pirate, and rogue you control. So this is like a pirates card. Like pirates is a deck. It is a deck that people are trying to play. It is a deck that Jason is trying to play. I mean, I think that it's going to get there eventually. This is definitely a decent one, obviously. If you steal something good, you get to also pump up your team, but also just creating a treasure token on the low end is not bad. The fact that this is a 2/2 for 3 is like not ideal, but when you're looking for cards for your pirates typal deck, this is as good as you could do, I think, some of the time. And this is a nice new one. Okay, so I think we are, yeah, just about at the end of the set review. Oh, and I gotta move again. All right, hold on. Coming down here. All right, I'm down here. I'll make myself a little bigger. All right. Perfect. Okay, so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the crystals. And the big reason to talk about them is the first line of text. So they all do similar things. They say spells of whatever color the crystal is. So like the earth crystal is the green one. It says green spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now, this kind of effect, they don't print it very often. This kind of just generic spells of a color cost 1 less. Like the medallions are 2 mana versions of this, the Jet Medallion, Sapphire Medallion. Now, most of those cards don't see a ton of play. Ruby and Sapphire Medallion are probably the only 2 that we ever really play in Highlander. But the decks that want those cards probably would pay 4 mana for one of those cards as well. I don't know. It's not quite as good. Like Ruby Storm is one of the decks that really wants access to mana reduction, and they're probably willing to pay 4 mana for the Fire Crystal. High Tide might be willing to pay 4 mana for the Water Crystal. All these cards also have a secondary effect. So the Fire Crystal says creatures you control have haste. Noteworthy, in the Ruby Storm deck, one of your new win conditions is the Storm Dragon. And so this is something that enables the Storm Dragon to attack the turn it comes into play, which is genuinely not nothing. But yeah, so they all have kind of a second effect, a static effect. So the Earth Crystal says if 1 or more +1 counters will be put on a creature control, twice that many counters are put on that creature instead. That one's very good, to be fair, as far as effects go. The Wind Crystal says if you would gain life, gain twice that much life. The Fire Crystal gives all your creatures haste. Pretty good, not terrible. The Water Crystal says if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill that many cards +4 instead. Mill, not a strategy that sees a lot of play in Canadian Highlander, to put it lightly. It is worth noting that I did see a video talking about like Sphinx's tutelage plus the Water Crystal. I think that was a MTGO Goldfish video, and they were talking about it, I think, in the context of Commander. But like, yeah, maybe you can build some kind of engine where the milling matters. I think realistically you're playing it for the cost reduction. And then Blackwell in the Darkness Crystal says if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it, and you gain 2 life. So it's like a kind of it's a Staxy piece, you know, like it does interact with some graveyard decks, which is again not nothing, but it's not incredible. And then they all have an activated ability that costs 6, and because they cost 6, it's hard to really evaluate them as being all that valuable. Yeah, the only ones to me that seem especially interesting are the Darkness Crystal says put target creature card exiled with the Darkness Crystal onto the battlefield tapped under your control with 2 additional counters on it. So like as a control finisher, like maybe this card is playable. I don't think so, but maybe. And the Earth Crystal says for 6 mana, distribute 2+1/+1 counters on up to 1 or 2 target creatures you control. And remember that because of the static ability on that one, that's 4 counters secretly. Which is pretty good. That's a good engine. But again, the 6 cost of this just means that it's pretty prohibitive to imagine doing much with it. The red one basically makes a token, but again, it costs 6, so a token of a creature you control, but it's just so expensive. The blue one mills an opponent equal to the number of cards in your hand, and for 4 more, but again, too expensive. But these are cool cards. I like them. I think they're interesting, and I think that you shouldn't be shocked to see them appear in decks. And it's also probably worth thinking about them. At least knowing that we have access to more of these cost-reducing effects is relevant. My guess, if I had to guess, is that the ones that are most likely to see play are the green one, the red one, and maybe the blue one. The green one in the +1/+1 counter stack, I mean, you probably would pay 4 mana for this effect. The counters doubling effect is just so good that I think you probably would pay 4 mana for it. But the fire and water crystal, I think you are maybe only seeing in combo decks, and the wind and the darkness crystal, I don't envision seeing a lot of play, but who knows? I could be wrong. So yeah, that's it. That's the set review. We were actually at the end of the slideshow. I probably missed some things. Lord knows I missed some last time. So if there are any cards that I didn't talk about that you wish I had, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I will more than happily give you my input or thoughts about cards in the comments, or maybe if there's enough of them, I can make a follow-up video. I just wanted to get this out quickly. We'll be back on a regular content schedule somewhat soon. There's been a bunch of real life stuff happening. So we've had a bit of trouble with recording, but look forward to new videos with the Final Fantasy cards when they come out. And thanks so much for watching. Please like the video, show it to more people, and subscribe if you're not already. We actually get really good engagement on subscriptions, but if you're not one of the people who subscribe, we'd really love it if you would. So without further ado, I will see you next time, and enjoy your Final Fantasy pre-releases.